Thanks very much, and thanks to ICMIF for having me here today. So the topic is does size really matter, and we're going to go into the detail of that. There's probably two dimensions I could have taken on this presentation, two ways of interpreting that question. One is in terms of customer acquisition, so does size really matter in terms of finding and reaching and communicating with new customers, and the other is in terms of delivering your service in a digital setting. The second one for me is probably more interesting, but also maybe more challenging to deliver in a broad sense, because really delivering a great service to your customer is about the uniqueness of you. It's finding that absolute space that belongs to you and only you. So it requires more of an in-depth workshop approach. So I'll focus very much on the acquisition and messaging side, and I hope that's appropriate, otherwise it's going to be a very long hour for everybody. Just to introduce myself briefly, my name is Coman Fullard. It's a unique name, so I can be found. If you Google Coman Fullard, it's probably me. It's going to come up as a result, which is both a curse and a blessing. And I can be found on Twitter and LinkedIn and all sorts of other places. I work for a company called Continuum, which is a digital agency, a full-service digital agency, and it was established in Dublin in 2002. And by full service, what that means is we offer a range of services. So my focus in particular is strategy, UX and UI design, development, and also marketing and promotion, digital marketing promotion. But the full service dimension, that is actually what we prefer to offer, is an integrated approach to all of those. So rather than someone coming in and saying, I want a website, our preferred relationship with a client is they come in and say, look, this is our business and these are our commercial goals. What can we do in a digital setting to realize those goals? And that consultative approach, that partnership approach, that collaborative approach, we call it the Continuum, because the point is it's a sequence of iterative activities where we continue to investigate and understand and then act, test and measure, act, test and measure, act and test and measure on an ongoing lifetime basis. And many of our clients have been with us for 5, 6, 7 years. And that's the kind of sweet spot that we're looking for all the time. My own background is very mixed. I was an engineer originally and then went into IT and was an IT manager for several startups before going into marketing. And I was a marketing manager in a distinctly non-digital sense for many, many years for Johnson & Johnson. And now I'm kind of marrying those two dimensions, the digital and the hardcore marketing, in this current role with Continuum. And we have a broad range of clients, from quite small to quite big, from small pockets to deep pockets, all looking to do a range of things. But in the end, the commonality is what they want to do is communicate who they are to the right people and get them to act on their behalf, to either, whether that's to buy or to lift up the phone or to lobby or whatever it might be. They have a range of communication goals, from charities to semi-state bodies to pure e-commerce businesses to offline businesses. And our job is to uncover that uniqueness about them and help them communicate it through a range of channels. So back to the topic at hand. So the classic story that illustrates is bigger, necessarily better, is David and Goliath. So here is an Italian etching that shows the end of that story. So just to remind ourselves what that story is, David is, or Goliath rather, is a giant with a huge sword who kills all before him. And David, a shepherd, is able to defeat him by using a slingshot that hits him on the head from a distance outside of the reach of the sword, stuns him, knocks him over, and David runs up, grabs the sword and beheads him, gives him the coup de grace, which is what's illustrated here. And that gives us 3 key lessons that we can apply as we move forward. Specifically, that success here is about being highly targeted, agile, and ruthless. And the ruthless sounds worse than it is. Ruthless here is in the context of your campaigns. So whatever you're doing, is it delivering the results you want it to? And if it's not, cut. You need to be focused on the things that are working. And to understand that also means you need to understand if it's working. So that's about metrics and goals. Have you defined what it's supposed to be giving you? And are you measuring against that? And having measured against that, are you acting in relation to it? Because it's very hard sometimes to accept this campaign, this activity we're doing that we spent time and effort thinking about isn't delivering results. But the worst thing you can do is continue to follow that. And to a certain extent, that's where the agility comes in. So having been ruthless, okay, how can we shift? How can we learn from that failing and do something else that's successful? It isn't atomic, it failed for a reason. And if you can understand those reasons, then you can apply that to your next phase. And highly targeted is about dividing your audience. There's no point in speaking to everybody because not everybody's interested. You want to find the right people, ideally at the right time, and that's what's going to make you successful. Now, and this is the difference between the small company that doesn't have necessarily a huge amount of money to spend and an enormous company that has loads. Because an enormous company that has loads might be willing to waste a certain amount. So we're going to broadcast broadly because that way we'll reach that small proportion. But that costs you a lot more to hit that group. But if you can be very, very targeted, then you can be very focused, and that it directly limits your spend. So we're going to go through some fundamentals. So what drives conversion? So here is a mnemonic. So it's a formula, and we can argue about whether the formula is true in terms of its multipliers and so on. But what's definitely true is the elements within it, and it's a useful way to remember what's important in conversion. So the probability of conversion is directly impacted by the match between the offer and the visitor motivation. So is the thing you're offering right for the person right now, right where they are? If they followed an ad to your page, did they follow it for the specific offering, or was it just because it was kind of close to what they were looking for and they were exploring it? Well, if it was for the specific offering, they're more likely because it's a closer match. If it was kind of close, they're less likely. So that closeness is important. The clarity of your value proposition. Have you made it very, very clear generally what their benefit is going to be? When if they take up your offer, do they understand what they're going to experience? If there's any doubt about that, they're not going to take up your offer. Clear incentives to action. Classic problem for many websites, but landing pages and ads is, okay, we've done all this work, we've got you here, but then we don't tell you what to do next. We don't make it happen. Incentive to action also includes things like price, discount, an implication of scarcity. So, okay, this offer is going to end within a couple of days or whatever it might be. So there's a lot of stuff bundled in there, but you need to give people a reason to act. And then something that takes away from the likelihood of converting is friction in the sales process. So how difficult do you make it to act to get to the next stage? So a classic example of friction in most sales processes, which many of you might have experienced, is the validated by Visa. So if you're buying something on an online basis and you've picked your product, you put in your details, put in your credit card information, and then suddenly, boom, you go to another page that says validated by Visa, you have to put in another password, and so on. That's a step. It's an added step. That's what's added friction. And if you look at the drop-offs of that e-commerce process, I'll bet you any money that there's a huge drop-off at that point. People just abandon. I know I abandon all the time when I see that because partly I don't remember that password. And it's a pain to have to go and reset it. So that's friction. Now, the other problem with that is it also potentially goes against the value proposition because that's there for one reason. It's there to protect, theoretically to eliminate fraud, but really that's to protect the credit card company. And the vendor has put that in place because they've had a relationship with the credit card company who wants them to have it. So what the vendor is telling you, the customer, is, well, I value that relationship more than I'm valuing that relationship. And that's not to say it's not appropriate to have it. Sometimes having friction in there is a good thing because it can remove frivolous inquiries. So sometimes you might want a bit of friction if you're generating leads, because the ideal thing isn't that you get 100 leads. Say you get 100 leads that are from the right person. 100 bad leads is a waste of time. So sometimes injecting a bit of friction can qualify those leads. So it depends on what you're trying to do. And the last and very important is anxiety caused by the process. So that can be tied into a whole series of things, but a simple element of that might be, I've clicked on a link and I've gone to the next page in the process, which otherwise is fine, but it just looks slightly different. The logo's over here and it was over there, or the color tone is different. So these are very subtle things that you mightn't think about, but they create anxiety because the concern is, oh, is this legitimate? Am I still in the same process, or is someone scamming me here? And there's a whole series of things that can impact that, but that's part of the conversion. And the reason why that's important isn't just for a sale because I'm interested and I buy a product. That's not the conversion I'm talking about. The truth is your classic sales funnel is made up of a sequence of conversions as you progress people through the process. At least for things that require a little more thought in the purchasing process. If I'm just buying, something from an online supermarket, that's a very short journey because I don't have to do much thinking about it. Although in truth, most of those processes are incredibly friction. It's quite a pain to buy that stuff unless you're rebuying things you already bought. So the sales function is made up of a sequence of many conversions across multiple channels. So some of this is on your website, some of it is in email, it's on search engines, it's in your advertising process, social media, etc. So there's a whole sequence of conversions as you try and take people from, we never heard of you, all the way through, oh, okay, I know what you want and that's the kind of thing I want. Okay, it's exactly the kind of thing I want, let's negotiate about it. Okay, let's buy it. Oh, I love it, I'm going to tell everyone about it. That's the journey we want to take people on. And each of those is a mini decision. Now the good news about thinking about it in these terms is if you want to double your business, it isn't necessarily about getting 100% more traffic. It's about, mathematically, for a 6-stage process like this, it's about a 14% improvement in conversion at each of those subsequent stages. So it means you can break down that task into a sequence of mini jobs, but only if you genuinely understand that sales funnel for your business, both in terms of where people come in and what makes them progress to the next stage. So one of your fundamental steps is to map this into your business and understand how it works. It also means some of these stages could be working very efficiently, but it's not translated to the end because one isn't for whatever reason. So taking this approach allows you to identify, well, where's the starting point? What's the real weakness? And prioritize how you do it. Because if you want to hit all of these, well, that's a lot of work. So let's sequence the work and manage it that way. And so you can pick your weakest point and start from that point. And that's really going to be the crux of this presentation as we go forward. I'm going to look at these in more detail. So here are your 4 steps to success. And to a certain extent, I can end the presentation here. This is a strategic piece. And if you learn this, you're going to be happy. As we go forward, certainly for part 4, I'll give you some tactical and some hot tips in relation to how you do it, but really this is the core lesson. The first is to articulate your strategy. The second is to understand the analytics and set goals for those steps. The third is to find your quick wins, so do the things that are prioritized and do the things that are going to give you some bang straight away, because that can fuel the rest of the process and it buys you time. And fourth is to optimize that funnel step by step. So understand those steps. You don't necessarily do them from the top to the bottom, you prioritize them, but you optimize as you go through and squeeze more and more business through that acquisition funnel. Now, articulate your strategy. Why do I say that? This is kind of fundamental marketing stuff. But the reality is most of the clients that we meet, they haven't done that. So the strategy exists, but it's in their head, or it's in their management head, the marketing team's head. And the problem with that is that all of those are different. When we get managers, when we get a management team into a room or we interview them individually about what their strategy is, you get a lot of commonality, but you get enough differences that it's a worry. And that's a real problem when it's the salesperson, sales director has a different attitude than the marketing director, has a slightly different attitude than their boss, has a slightly different attitude than operations. Because those variations cause real problems. And it happens at the next layer down as well, between my marketing executives, my marketing managers, my salespeople. And the reason why that's problematic is as the customer transits down that sales funnel, they get passed from responsibility to responsibility. So at some stage they flip from marketing into sales. Maybe in marketing you might have, okay, there's somebody handling the digital advertising, there's someone else doing the landing page design, there's someone else doing writing the white papers or the content that nurtures those relationships. If that experience isn't consistent from step to step, well, that injects a lack of clarity on your value proposition, which is a direct impactor on your conversion, potentially increases anxiety, and it distracts from the match between motivation and your offer. So that consistency is really important. And the only way you can be consistent is if it's clearly articulated, by which I mean someone's thought about it, written it down, and shared it with the whole team. So it's there to be checked and considered against every time. So every time you go to optimize one of these stages, you're always going back to your fundamentals to remind yourself, is the thing I'm doing feeding into this strategy? And if it's not, I shouldn't be doing it. Again, this efficiency is another reason how you can, another way to manage that spend, because you're not wasting time on stuff that isn't driving your core commercial goal. And that's the first question in your strategy. So what is a strategy? I get asked that all the time. The strategy is one of those terms that it covers a lot of things. But if you can answer these questions, in essence, you have a strategy. You have something you can work with. What is your commercial goal? So what are you trying to achieve commercially? To whom are you selling? And that, I mean that in quite a detailed way. So demography, that's one element of it, but you need to understand beyond that, and I'm going to show you a simple model to help you get beyond that. What is your value proposition? Again, we meet clients all the time. We ask them, well, what's your value proposition? Oh, we're very cheap, or we get it, we deliver it very quickly. That's not enough, because it's a complex offering that you're trying to offer. And again, I'll show you a model shortly to help you refine that. What is your message, which is a direct extension of your value proposition? So how are you going to speak about the thing that you're offering? What channels are you going to use? Because again, if it's bang for buck, you can't speak on every channel because that takes effort, money, time. So you've got to pick those channels, and you want to pick the channels where your customers are. So it goes back to understanding to whom you're selling. And then what is the cost of acquisition? So what does it cost you right now to acquire a customer? That's critically important to understand, because you can use that to measure success for every other stage. If you know how much it costs you to acquire a customer, then every time you buy, essentially spend money to acquire another customer through any of these activities, as long as it's less than or equal to that cost of acquisition, it's reasonably scalable. You're not impacted. Ideally less than. But if it's more than, you need to consider if this is the right channel for you. So we have multiple models for our customers. And again, the challenge is typically they're in our head. If you've got two Irish people in a room talking about their customer, their one customer, probably there's two models, maybe three, depending on who you've got in the room. So, and undoubtedly that's the case across all of your organizations. If you haven't agreed what the customer is, you get this echo chamber of perception. And it's so important because you've got to match your messaging and your conversion approach to who the customer is. And if there's a variation, then likely there's going to be a variation in that journey, which is going to impact conversion. So here's a very, very simple model to arrive at it. It doesn't have to be paragraphs and paragraphs of demography and so on. What it should identify, or what's effective at least, is if you identify what are the customer's goals, so what are they trying to achieve in the relationship with you and in a broader sense. What are their pains? So what's the problem that's stopping them achieving those goals? And what are their gains? What do they get or make or receive or experience as a result of achieving those goals? And if you can understand those three, you can start to build a communication platform that talks to that customer in a way that's meaningful to them. So rather than talking about what we have, you're talking about what you need. And just because of the way the brain is wired, pains are more evocative than gains. And that's because the chemical in the brain that's associated with pain lasts twice as long, it has twice the half-life as the chemical in the brain that's associated with joy and happiness. So typically that's the way. But that's not to say that you have to go that route. You can stay positive, you can stay focused on the gains, but you can also make removing those pains a very positive thing as well. So but you typically find that would be the mix of success when you use those messages. And look, the way you populate this is very simple. Get your team together in a boardroom, a whiteboard, and a load of Post-its, and just start imagining who your customer is. And if you've got multiple customers, break them out, do them separately. And then having broken them out, look, are they genuinely separate? Because if their goals, pains and gains are the same, they're probably not really separate. So the same messaging will apply. But if they're dramatically different, then they're definitely separate. So do think about that, your segmentation, because this is all about being targeted and focused. And so we come to the value proposition, and the truth is, whatever you think your value proposition is, what it is that intersection between what the customer wants and what you want them to want. So again, we meet clients all the time and say, well, customers should buy because we offer this. The truth is they buy for the reasons they buy, and you need to uncover that. You need to define it. And this is another area where ruthlessness is important, because you can fall in love with your own value proposition, and indeed you should. If you don't love it, nobody will. But that can get in the way of focusing on the thing that's really working. So you need to uncover that, and that's typically a company like us will come in and interview a load of your customers and try and uncover that and take away. And primarily we can do that because we haven't bought into your value proposition. We have no love for it. We're totally neutral about that. We're trying to uncover the knob that's really right. But you don't need necessarily a third party to do that if you can be honest with yourself. So it's worth having those conversations. And here, a value proposition identifies your target entities. So we did that map of who our customers are. It should call them out explicitly. It might have a time horizon, because sometimes an offering has a time horizon. You need to talk about what it is that you want your target entities to do. So this goes back to what's the point of conversion. What is it you're trying to get them to do? Are there compelling alternatives, and what are they? So what could they choose instead, or what are they choosing right now? And what experiences will they get if they do the thing you want them to do? And that's critical, because this is what you're offering them. This is what they're going to experience. And again, this goes back to their pains and gains. Their experience will be some of those pains go away, or they achieve some of those gains. And this helps you understand the fit between your customer and your value proposition, because you can see their pains and gains, and you can see how much of those you deal with. Well, The more of those you deal with or deliver, the better the value proposition fit. And that's critical, because just going through this exercise doesn't mean you've won. Some value propositions are worse than others. Some experiences aren't as good. So you're trying to maximize that experience and maximize how you communicate about it. So when you do this, though, you're looking for specific, actionable, and comparatives, so that you can see how it's better than everyone else, or the other elements in your marketplace, or the elements in your marketplace you're going after. You don't necessarily have to compete against everybody. You might just be choosing to compete in terms of market leaders or core segments based on the customer. So again, this is the value proposition canvas. It goes with the previous diagram. Here you get in that boardroom again with the whiteboard, post-it notes, and look at your offering in terms of, well, these are the products and services we offer, these are the gain creators, these are the pain relievers. And you could put your circle right beside it and see, okay, well, these gains are delivered, these pains are relieved, and you can see all of your customers that way. And it's just a very simple visual way of doing that. Again, it's not about huge paragraphs or a 50-page book about your value proposition. You can capture in one diagram, and in essence, what your value proposition is. And that might be per product line. You might have to do that per offering. You might have to do it from a corporate level and then per offering or per department, whatever way you're structured. But it means that I can then share that page with all of the team who are going to execute against it and understand, they can understand very clearly and consistently how to do it, where the points of conversation are. So the next piece is Google Analytics, or analytics really, but Google Analytics is essentially the standard that's out there. It's an incredibly powerful tool, and you will already have websites, by and large, I'm certain, and you'll already be getting significant traffic to that site. And that traffic is a gift in terms of understanding that overlap between your offering and your customers. Because just because not everyone's coming through as a final customer doesn't mean that value proposition isn't relevant for all of them. They may be falling off for other reasons. And that analytics process can help uncover that. So I would recommend that you personally get training on it, or whoever has marketing responsibilities making decisions gets some training on it. It doesn't have to be a lot, a half day, there's a lot of online courses, but it just gives you the flexibility and the fluidity to go in and carve up that information a little bit for yourself. Otherwise, you're relying on someone else, and if you're relying on someone else's interpretation of the data, you're relying on their brain and their insights, and I'm sure that's perfectly fine, but if you're making the decisions, it's good to be able to do that yourself. It's really useful, obviously, in terms of identifying demographics. Google Analytics provides a host of tools that gives you demographic insights, and it's, there are warnings and caveats associated with the full truth of that information, but I think it's fair to say that by and large it's directionally correct, and it's certainly worth considering. Now, if it totally contradicts everything you're learning offline through phone surveys, it's probably worth parking, because that's probably more fundamental, but by and large it won't. It should be fine. And it'll help you learn what people are doing. Where are they coming from? What sites are they coming from? Through search engines, through links. That's really important to understand, because that tells you what they're searching for. Where are they coming into? What are the pages that are actually providing traction, that are attracting people in? And where are they staying when they come in? What are they doing when they get in? What does that tell you about their conversion process? Are they confused? Or are they really happy with this content? And if they're happy with that content, well, are you able to leverage that information, that insight, in some way? I would also recommend setting up goals and funnels. So the analytics as it stands will tell you what pages you've come to, how far they've lingered. But by and large, you already have some conversion set up. We want people to send us their email address, for instance, or subscribe. But you won't necessarily know where they've fallen off in the funnel. You just know they went on a page that had that form. But goals and funnels can help you understand how much they've gone through. And so the sales funnel that I identified earlier can essentially be replicated in analytics. And you can actually track how far down the sales funnel people go if you assign elements of the site in terms of the content and interaction to that funnel. So it can be incredibly insightful. The other warning, the big warning, is that averages lie. So when you see there is no average customer, that's the reality. I remember I saw something on the news this morning where the Central Statistics Office in Australia defined the average Australian as a 37-year-old woman with 3 children living in a 3-bedroom house, or 2 children living in a 3-bedroom house, but whose parents had come from the UK. And then they sought to find one of those people in Australia, and they couldn't find one. So they defined an average Australians, couldn't find one that matched exactly that replicate. So averages lie, and there's an inherent danger in that. So you need to dig beyond that. So look for distributions. That's much more insightful. That tells you where the majority of your population is, clusters. Make comparisons, compare between sections, compare between demographics, and so on. So that's very important. And you can go even deeper with this, but you probably will want third-party help with that. That's not, or even deeper training that I'm talking about. But I think you can get an awful lot of insight here. It can really help you how your site is working, but also how your customers are interacting with that site. So there are a sequence of quick wins that can happen here as well. Your current site could be suffering from a thing that's basically like malnutrition for sick people. So malnutrition probably mightn't be why you're sick, but it will stop you getting better. And so the way this is in terms of is basically how technically complete is the SEO on the site, or the search engine optimization. Is your site getting in the way of search engines finding you? And the reason why that's important is the vast majority of organic or unpaid traffic comes in through the search engines. So if you make it hard for the search engines to index your content, you're making it essentially hard for traffic to find you. And it's not just about indexing, it's our link building, and are those links, so are people linking to your site? And are the people who are linking to your site reputable or not? So there's a whole sequence of stuff that's there. Much of it is easily fixed once you know it. And you can get a lot of cheap or free software that can build a report very quickly and point out these are the things that are the problem. Okay, none of your images have image tags. All your header tags on the pages are exactly the same on each page. There are no H1 tags. There's a whole sequence of things, but they're really, really simple to fix once you know about them. So you can build a report, or you can hire somebody like us who can do an audit. We can essentially do the same, and then we can prioritize those, and maybe even make those changes for you. And there'll be plenty of agencies who will offer that service. But as I say, you can do it yourself. I would also say interview your customers. Talk to them about their experience on your site, particularly recent conversions. So anyone who just came through, okay, what was wrong, what was not wrong? I mean, the ideal one to talk to is someone who didn't convert, but they're harder to reach. And do study your competitors. It's worth understanding what everyone else in the sector is doing. Are there any lessons that you can learn? But here is a load of stuff you can add together very, very quickly. Site load times is also critical. If your site if that page is loading in, say outside 3 seconds, you're probably already losing a huge amount. And in fact, that's getting shorter and shorter all the time. So you want it to load fully as quickly as possible, or at least to load sequentially, so that the top screen loads straight away, even if the rest loads later, because that can be critical to people just walking away. So I've mentioned talk to experts every now and again. So bringing in agencies isn't necessarily a bad investment. Okay, I know people can be concerned, straight away our costs are ballooning, but experts are experts for a reason. They can focus on the things that are important. So I've given you a couple of things to think about if you're going to do that. First of all, know what it is that you want them to do. So define your expectations and that need. And it's okay if that's broad, just as long as you've defined it, because you need to know what you're asking for. There's no point in having a kind of a cloudy, very broad conversation with no real focus, because it's very hard for the agency to decide how we can act and organize ourselves to support you. But your experts, when they come in, should challenge. They shouldn't just, okay, yeah, we'll do that. I mean, that's great, that's nice to hear, but they should also be looking beyond that, because if they're the experts, they should be able to uncover or identify what's the problem underneath that. What are the misconceptions baked into the thing you're asking? So you should be looking for those challenges. They should be focusing on growth, on conversion rates, and ROI. So what is you trying to grow to, and what is it going to cost you from an investment perspective? If they're not having that conversation, they're doing you a bit of a disservice. So that should be the conversation. And I would prioritize the relevant experience over creativity. So creativity is great, and if you can get relevant experience and creativity together, fantastic. But I would prioritize relevant experience first, because that means they can get to the heart of that matter. It doesn't necessarily mean relevant experience in your industry, though that's fantastic. What it mostly means is relevant experience in this approach, in the conversion rate optimization approach. People who understand how email marketing works, how advertising works, how landing pages convert, etc., etc. I would also want to understand the deliverables. So we said, define your expectations and needs first. At the end of that conversation, they'll say, okay, this is what we're going to deliver to you. Understand what that means and what it doesn't mean, because that's the way you're going to make sure you've arrived at something that delivers your value. Also clarify the pricing model. Again, this is one of those areas where prices can spin out of control. Some have incredibly transparent pricing model. I would argue ours is very, very transparent. And the nature of our conversations as we go through manages and maintains that. But there are others that are less so, and there are others that can spin out of control. So you need to make sure you have that conversation and truly understand what that pricing model means for you. But once you've selected an expert or an agency or whatever it might be, integrate them into your team. Don't treat them as an outsider or a third party where stuff is hidden or whatever else. Integrate them into your team. Sign the requisite NDAs, but make them part of what you're doing, because they are, if you're hiring them to do a job, it's because it's critical for it to be done. And the best way that's going to succeed is if they have that total exposure to your business, that they can go beyond just the information you've given me in a brief, that they have an opportunity to understand your business beyond that. So those are the fundamentals. If you can take those fundamentals, you're already in a great starting position. And so that's probably more broadly strategic. Now I'm going to talk about actually hacking this sales funnel, working people through this process. So this is maybe a little bit more tactical, and what I'll try and do is give you just a couple of meaningful takeaways as we go through this. So again, we're going to look at our funnel, and what we want to do is identify, first of all, what are our conversion rates across the funnel. Right now you might have a picture of what your digital conversion rates are. I know I get X traffic and I get Y leads, so my conversion rate for the total funnel is that. But the truth is, you need to break it down and try and understand how people are going to progress through that. And if that doesn't exist right now, you're going to have to create it, or at least imagine what might it look like. What would that journey look like? And for each of those stages, you need to identify KPIs. So what am I going to measure that shows me I've been successful at a conversion rate? And so that might be traffic, which maybe gives me an email address because they're subscribing to a newsletter or whatever else. A qualified lead, so I've got their email address and they're telling me they're interested in a particular product range, or I can identify the market space that they're in. Let's say I offer to construction and let's say I offer insurance, for instance, to construction and events teams. And based on the content they've come to, I know these guys are construction because they've looked at health and safety issues in relation to construction. That's a qualified. Negotiators, when they've picked up the phone, so let's say they've been inspired based on that to actually have a conversation with you, or they've responded to an email exchange. Customers, they've now bought from me, they're in that initial phase of that setup phase. And then engagers, someone who's already bought from me, and further than that, they're an advocate. They're really happy with that process. They're happy to tell other people. And you may have loads of those customers, you just perhaps don't know it, or you haven't engaged with them, or given them an excuse, a reason, or a mechanism to tell other people. Because and I would have said for mutual organizations, this is probably a fantastic area to focus on, because your customers are your members, and so they're perhaps more motivated than others to make you successful. So here is a fantastic space for you. Pick a start and quantify the growth in ROI. So you're going to be effective in some of these areas, maybe very, very effective. Don't start where you're most effective. Start where you're least effective, because that's where you're going to have the impact. So prioritize that approach. And then define your ROI. So this is what I'm going to spend, and this is the uplift I expect. That's critical to define, because that's your real success. And then be ruthless. If it's not achieving that, and don't wait till the end, you want your milestones. If it's not achieving that, cut it off, because you're going to need to do something else to achieve that ROI. And definitely, you may well want to seek expert advice. Now that could mean hire someone in, or when I have somebody on board who's going to own this, who has the requisite skills, because we're doing quite specific but tactical things here, or get an agency and go through those rules that I defined earlier. So, stage one is probably keyword research. Ultimately, you're found. One of the biggest ways you're going to be found is through SEO, through search engines, and essentially that's a text search. So people are putting in queries, and theoretically they're finding you. How are they doing that? Is that happening just loosely as an aggregation of the content you put in, or does it reflect a strategic choice that you're putting in content that reflects keywords, that reflects your user personas and what they need? Ideally, that's the approach. You want to make sure that you're building content and representing yourself in a way that reflects the gains, pains, and goals of those personas that you've identified, and possibly even broken down in terms of what stage in the funnel they might be at, because you're trying to progress all of those stages in different ways. So you need to look at who are your personas, what is your value proposition, and what is your messaging, and out of that distill, these are the 10 or 15 or 20 keywords that we want to have meaningful ownership for. And with a bit of look, you want that to be fairly unique. So you need to look at your competitive space. You can go head to head with someone else on the same keywords, and that's fine, but definitely that's one of the ways that price goes up, because now if both of you are bidding on the same set, because the way AdWords works, it is an open bid, so the guy who bids the most gets the work. So now, that's obviously in advertising, but these are not disintegrated, so they're not separate. You want to make sure that the ideal situation is your organic approach is mirrored by your advertising approach, because that's consistency, it's congruent. And so you need to be thinking about that. Are you owning a space that's unique? And it goes back to your value proposition, because ideally your value proposition shows your win, your benefit of experience against a competitor. In terms of the research for this, it's inspired, as I say, by your personas and so on, but you need to test against Google AdWords, see what else is being bid on. That gives you a sense, again, even though this is about the broad piece, it gives you a sense of what other companies are focusing on. And I would start also looking at your analytics and seeing if you've got a help or a search engine, what are people searching for when they come to your site? What questions do they ask? Because that's the piece they need help on. And it's also the piece they're not finding easily on your site. So that's a good indicator of how you can build a really meaningful bundle of keywords. Content marketing plays for your prospects, for your leads, and your qualified leads. It's in that finding initially, oh yeah, okay, I like what you're doing, and then nurture them towards your specific products. And it can deliver a whole range of support for those customers searching for a solution. But it is a long tail effect. It's not something that's going to deliver value straight away. It definitely delivers value over time, and it can deliver real value because it's evergreen. I can write a piece today that might be relevant for 4 years. That might need very little revision over that time. So it's incredibly efficient from that perspective. So it can be, evergreen. It can drive traffic and so conversions to your business on an ongoing basis. And it definitely services your SEO from that perspective if it's been developed in line with your personas and your value proposition, because the content essentially reinforces your keywords. And so now Google sees, well, not only have you got relevant content that matches those keywords you're looking for, but also people are coming, traffic comes to that site, and it's very sticky, people stay there. And so it drives that SEO piece. And the more valuable the content, the more likely people are to link to it, and that's a key dimension for SEO as well. So content marketing is absolutely valuable. And if you think about it, your offering, it's not a quick decision process. People do have to go through a thought process in terms of which one will I choose and why. And so here, if we go back to our construction piece, we might have, for prospects, we might have general advice on health and safety or managing health and safety in a construction setting. After they come in, it might be, okay, here's more specific, here's a white paper, or here's a guide that you can download to actually work on the site to make sure everything is in line with whatever or compliant with whatever rules you've got. And here, and to get that, you get their email address, and then after a few email exchanges, perhaps they've self-selected by doing some other action that you think. So you can work your way down through here utilizing that content. Content actions, right? So how do you arrive at that? What's critical? So what's critical is that you have a content plan. You could go away and start doing content straight away, but actually good content is a lot of work. You need to sit down and think about it, and I publish content on our site and I agonize over it because it's up there and it's there forever. So it represents you, and it needs to represent your value proposition, who you are, and it needs to speak to the customers you talk to. So you need to think about it, spend time on and energy on it. So it must be aligned to your marketing objectives, and it must be made relevant to the personas you're trying to attract. So you have to think in those terms. So this is where you go back to this diagram and remind yourselves of that. It's cross-channel, so it's not just about the content on your site. It can leverage what are you going to do on social media, what are you going to do through your email marketing. So you can indeed align it offline as well. What am I going to do in print? What am I going to do in newspaper? What am I going to do at events? And in fact, the most effective approach is to look at it from a truly multi-channel perspective and see how all of these become a self-sustaining system, where the stuff you're doing offline supports the email, supports the ads, supports the content, etc. They're all talking to each other. Critically, you need to assign owners and give them deadlines. Otherwise, it's not really a calendar and it won't get done. So we're all very, very busy. You'll have other things to do. If you haven't got a deadline and it doesn't belong to somebody, it'll just get pushed out and pushed out. So if you want to do it, you have to assign that. And having done, you want to promote your content. So but that's actually good news. It allows you to get yourself onto other channels. So we've got this on the site. This is where we want people to come, but I can put stuff out on social media to get them in. I can maybe do a video and put it on YouTube. YouTube being the world's second biggest search engine, even though no one necessarily thinks of it in those terms. And video is incredibly important. So content isn't just text. Video is incredibly important, increasingly so. And I would always encourage you to look at video as an opportunity to attract more people, because the harsh and sad reality is people read less and less. They might flick through 15 documents, but they might only read one because they're flicking through, looking for signals yet that this is what going to be worth my while. Okay, I will now read it. But video, a 2-minute video, a 1-minute video, it's harder to walk away from that. It's very straightforward and very easy. So I would reflect on that. And I would also suggest the 2 secrets to video. The first secret to video is good audio, not good video. People, if they're going to listen to it, it needs to be high quality audio. Any kind of weirdness or scratchiness in that, and just turn it off and walk away. Because particularly if you listen to it in headphones, it's just too intimate. So the secret is good audio. So it isn't necessarily expensive. You can do it quite cheaply now with an iPhone. Increasingly there are, there's several news, there's at least one news channel in Switzerland, and they have no cameras. Their entire news output is delivered via iPhone. And so RTE is the Irish state broadcaster. There's a team called the Mojo team, and they do solely iPhone related news reporting. And I can tell you, I've seen those reports on the news, side by side with the other stuff, and you cannot tell the difference. You don't know. Now those guys have a lot of skill, but you can simplify it so that you can still work very, very well. It's about simplifying it. And the real challenge with most video is actually the editing and assembly. But again, if you take a simple approach, like a whiteboard approach, so literally I'm going to do a presentation to the screen, you can do very effective stuff quite simply. And that looks much more authentic. The other secret to video that you should bear in mind as well is, ironically I said the secret to good video is good audio, about a huge chunk of the people, customers for video, don't listen to the audio. They rather unmute, so subtitles. So that they can, if it's on Facebook for instance, a lot of people don't load up the video, they just let it run in their feed. But if it runs in their feed, it runs on mute. So if they have subtitles, they can read it, and actually that might, they may well stick to that. So that's those are the 2 hints there. So when talking about ruthlessness and measurement, it's no less true here. Learn from the successes and the failures of your content. If you put up content and genuinely promote it, and people go to it, learn from that. Understand why did they go to that and not to this piece. And if it fails, also understand that. If there's an area that isn't working because of the content, you need to focus on why that's. Get those learnings. Because all of your content is a chance to segment and to qualify, and I should also add there, and to capture. So you can, based on the content they come in, if they come into general health and safety content, you don't know much about them, you've just got them in. If they come into construction health and safety, okay, well I already know they're in this segment. If I can get them to sign up for a guide, to give me their email address, I can qualify them even further. So that's the process you want to look at. How can you narrow them and push them down that funnel? And content is a fantastic opportunity, assuming you design or plan your content output with that in mind. So it has to be the starting point. So, as I say, quality content achieves marketing objectives, it impacts SEO, it has potentially high social engagement, but the worry is it is hard work. So my other advice on content is, look, it's okay to hire professional copywriters, and that's fantastic. They are perhaps outsiders, so that gives them license to stretch and dig deeper into the content. But another model would be, I write it first, and then I create the bullet points, and I get a copywriter to turn it into meaningful copy. Well-written copy is very, very powerful. It has a real ability to convert and make people do things. So that's not a bad investment. And sadly, with the death essentially of print, there's a huge amount of journalists out there who are available at incredibly competitive rates. So you can get, and if you create 1 or 2 good relationships with those guys, they can build up their knowledge of our industry, and they can become essentially a de facto employee, delivering really meaningful, really strong content on your behalf. So it's worth exploring. It must align with your keyword research. If it doesn't, then you're doing the wrong thing. It's just either your keyword research is wrong or your content is wrong. So those 2 must match. Also, don't bury the lead, and the same with headers for clarity and visuals. Again, the challenge is that most people aren't reading, they're skimming. So make your key point at the very beginning so that they get your message straight away. Use headers down the page to help define your total message. So don't do a header that's vague, it doesn't tell what the paragraph is. Essentially, make the header for that paragraph the point for that paragraph, so that almost they could get the message if they just read the headers. And use visuals. Infographics are incredibly powerful, very sticky, and people share them through social media. So that's a very useful way of translating that content. And it's also a way to double up the content. As I say, writing content is hard. So how can I use it on multiple channels? Well, here's a blog post. Then I'll do an infographic that reflects that, which I can do as a separate blog post, but also share through, for instance, Twitter or LinkedIn, and that's very positive. Or SlideShare. Maybe I have a presentation or a video that goes with that. I can do that through another channel, and again, link it back in. So we're constantly leveraging that one piece of insight, that piece of knowledge, but just talking about it in different mechanisms. So that's a great way to maximize the impact. But obviously, you'd be more inclined to do that for content that's working. So if you've got content that isn't working, it's probably not worth thinking about it in those multiple channels. But if stuff is sticky, just think about how can I get it out through different doors. Make it easy to share. The amount of sites that you go on where they have content, and it's either good or bad, but they don't have like simply a Twitter button. Oh, I like this, I'll tell my friends. That's essentially someone recommending you to their friends, to their network. And so it's a fantastic piece of social proof. So make it as easy as possible for them to do it. In fact, encourage them, ask them to do it. If they move their mouse to go away, give them a pop-up that says, would you like to share this with anybody? You know, it's absolutely worth doing. And by the same token, if someone has stayed on your page for a certain period of time, it's worth asking them if they'd like to subscribe for more information, or would they like to know more about this, or is there a white paper that relates to this? So here you can start to nurture them as a result of their activity on your page and move them to the next phase. So absolutely utilize that. Do ask for subscribers, ask for those emails, get them into a communication. Right now your site is passive, it's waiting for people to come. But if you can identify who they are, then you can ask them to do something else. So do make that point. I already spoke about audio and video. So I talked about the long-term, the long-tail impact of content. And here we see two pieces of customer acquisition. Paid acquisition in yellow, and on this side we have the SEO return of content. Paid acquisition, so buying ads is a great way to get a load of leads right now, okay? And it's highly scalable. I just need, if I want more links or more leads or people to come in, I just pay more, okay? So I just need to do that. But that's not true with content. Content will build over time if it's good content. So it's incredibly valuable, cost efficient from that perspective over that time period. And it might mean your reliance on paid acquisition can go down because you're getting the same level of traffic from your long-term content approach. So it's a good way of managing that overall spend. Social media is incredibly active. It's a great way to engage with your audience, and it hits your prospects and your leads, but also your current customers, the people you're servicing. And you can use this as part of your customer service approach, which has a broader halo effect. But there are clear hazards, particularly from a PR perspective, and you don't need to do much work to research some of the major social media blunders. Again, this is why it's worth having clear responsibility, clear ownership, but a clear picture of who your customer is, what they're trying to achieve, and what your value proposition is. Because if your post is outside of that, beware. So it's great on social media, and the desire is to show your authenticity, to show who you really are. But if who you really are is at odds with what you're offering, your customer is going to be turned off. That creates anxiety. So you must be consistent. And again, how can your social media person, who's probably different than your marketing person, who's different than your salesperson, know what they should be doing if it hasn't been articulated? So it goes back to that need to articulate all those things. And focus your activity. So there are many channels out there. You don't need to be on all of them. Where are your customers, or where are the majority of your customers? That's the key question. And be there. So it's great to explore new areas, and that's maybe worth a punt, but it goes back to being ruthless. If that's not delivering results, stop, because it's all time, and time is money. As I said, paid acquisition is great for traffic. What it's primarily great for is end of the funnel acquisition. So it can bring people in here, but really this is where it'll be bringing them in. People who are close to a decision. People click on ads because they've seen an ad for a thing that's really right. I'm right here, right now, and I need to come through. If the match isn't great, they might still come through, but they're unlikely to convert. But what paid acquisition is great for are people who are ready to buy. They've done some research already and they're ready to buy. You can use lookalike audiences here, so you can be quite targeted as well. So there's different types of paid acquisition. You can have display, or you can have pay-per-click. So display is, we'll show it to 1,000 people or thousands of people, and you pay for every time it's seen. And there are certain networks where that's the case. Or you pay-per-click, so we show it to thousands of people, but only the ones that click on it, you'll be charged for each time someone clicks on it. And they both have their benefits. So, it might seem that pay-per-click is better value, but it depends on what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. So you need to look at that and look at the network that's offering. But in each case, you can get very targeted about an audience. So even on the display ones, where you say we can show it to thousands of people, actually you can create audiences that are quite meaningful as long as you can define them. So the 1,000 people you're showing them to are actually 1,000 valuable, valid customers. So it's worth thinking about that. Do set a budget and ROI. I think when customers experience a big blow up in their budget, they wind up spending too much. It's often around the advertising, and it's just got away from them. They're spending too much because in a lot of cases it's a bidding section. They're bidding for words, and they've set up some automated rules, and it's just running and running. You have to stay on top of it, and to stay on top of it, you need to understand what it is you're trying to achieve. What's the ROI? What's the spend? What's the budget? So know that and manage it closely. This is a great area to have an agency work with you. But again, go back to what's their payment scheme, because sometimes this is where the billing process can be problematic. So understand who's paying for what the communication is. But it is an area where expertise is worthwhile, so it's worth either hiring someone with those skills or bringing in an agency. So remarketing is kind of another version of paid acquisition. So the difference is paid acquisition is the first time you've seen the ad. Remarketing is you've seen an ad or you've come to our site, so you've picked up a cookie. So now I know you're kind of qualified yourself a little bit. For whatever reason, you've come to our site and you go away. And now when you go away, you see our ad in a couple of different places. It's following you around, and you will have all experienced this. And that's remarketing. And remarketing is very impactful. It's relatively cost effective because it's usually charged on a pay-per-click basis, but in fact, people rarely click on those ads, or not to the same degree. What it tends to do is drive direct traffic. So people don't necessarily click on the ad and go then and do it. But because you've increased their awareness around your brand and your offering, it molds in their head, and it drives traffic back in what seems like an organic process. And again, that's why understanding your analytics is really important, because it will look like they're organic, but the truth is they're not. You've paid for that journey back in. So you need to set up your analytics to reflect that. Do, however, cap the frequency. There is nothing worse than seeing the same ad 50 times and not clicking on it. That is off-putting. That's at the point where, well, maybe not 50, less than that, is the point where it starts to negatively impact your brand. They don't need to see it that often. They just need to see enough. So get a sense for what that is, and then cap it at that. And don't be afraid to keep going back to that. And this is one of those things where you test. Okay, it was at 5 visuals. Let's cut it down to 3. If your traffic drops, okay, you've gone too far. Go back up. So it is worth looking at that. I think we're okay for time. So landing pages. So where do people go when they click on an ad? If they go to your front page, that's a waste for a lot of reasons, which I'm going to go into in a second. Ideally, think of every ad as a campaign. I'm doing something specific with this ad. I want the customer to take a specific action, so I want to build a page that they land on that aligns specifically with this ad. And that goes back to our conversion formula. It's about, they click on the ad because it's telling me a thing. So the page they come to shouldn't tell me that thing and 5 other things. It should just tell me that thing. So you need to make that match explicit. The only way to do it is to build a specific landing page with a clear call to action. So now they've come here, I want you to do something. Make it obvious what that thing is. Again, take away choice. Don't let them do 5 things. We want them to do 1 thing. Only let them do 1 thing. That's entirely okay, entirely appropriate. If your goal isn't to maybe send out an email, maybe it's to pick up a phone and talk to a customer service manager, use a dedicated number. Don't use the number that you publish in other places. Use a dedicated number. And the reason for that means I can now track the impact of that landing page. I know that the people who've picked up that number and rang that number have done so because of that ad. So it means I can measure the impact of that. And use conversion-centered design. So I have a slide on that. So there are 7 elements here. This is from a company called Unbounce, who this is their theory, but I think it's incredibly valid. Attenuation ratio, context and message matching, clarity, congruence, credibility, closing, continuance. These are the 7 elements of landing page design. And if you're outing some of these, you will impact negatively your conversion. So attention ratio is people can only handle so many things. So if you give them too many buttons to press, they'll try and press them all, or they'll push the wrong ones. If you have only, on a conversion page, you just want them to do that conversion action. So it's pick up a phone, give me your email address, buy the product, whatever it is. Only give them the choice to do that. Take away all of the navigation that allows them to navigate elsewhere. Don't supply them with other links. Keep it all on that page. If you can give them 3 choices or more, they'll start to get confused about what they should do. Give them only one choice. Make it easy to move forward. Context and message matching. If your ad uses one word, one set of words, make sure that set of words is on the page and is clear and obvious. Don't change the message. Don't, because you like that tagline but you want to do something else, don't do that. It must match. Otherwise you're creating anxiety and undermining what you're trying to do. Clarity, I mean, that's about the headline. Make it obvious. So I would favor simplicity over creativity. It's very easy to fall in love with a nice tagline. Oh, it's good, and it's a bit poetic, or it rhymes, and it's interesting. Tell the customer what you're giving them. That's all they want to know, and make it unambiguous. And the more clear you can be, the more likely you can get conversion. And you can test this very simply. If you do the same landing page twice for the ad, one with your nice creative one and one that is really bald and very simple, you will more than likely see the conversion rates, and one is much higher than the other. And there's a great opportunity here to do A/B testing if you want to run 2 of these side by side and exercise your ruthlessness and say, okay, well, I've got 2 running, one is the clear winner or one is the slight winner. We get rid of the other one and we're going to run with this from now on. That clarity is really impactful. So be very obvious about what it is, what's happening, and what they need to do. Congruence is how all of these elements tie together. So it's that harmony between your total, your value proposition, the offering you've got, the advert itself, your online and offline piece, even the imagery on the site. If you've got a picture of a person on your landing page, ideally that person is looking towards the button or the call to action, because where their eye line is where people will look. So that, in other words, the design is harmonized with the thing you want them to do. So make everything work together. Credibility. Show your social proof. So if you've got recommendations, if you're members of so if you're in Germany, what's fantastic is if we're a member of an industry association, that provides credibility. Other markets require other types of proof, but every market wants proof. So use your social proof, whatever it might be. Whether that's an audio video or a single comment from some customer who's really enjoyed it and it identifies who that person is, use that. Closing. In the closing, close. Make it easy for them to proceed. Give them a closure and give them a message that says, okay, thanks very much, we've done business, or we've achieved whatever it might be, or we've received your email address, and so on. Absolutely close out that transaction. And continuance. And when you close out that transaction, don't be afraid to start another one. So in that communication, ask them to do something else. So if I bought something online, here's a great chance to say, tell your friends on social media that you bought something online, and here are some of the links that you can use to do that. But equally, it could be, okay, well, you've bought this thing, would you like to talk about this other opportunity that's related to that? Or do you want us to add you to a newsletter list where we provide support for people who have bought this kind of product? Whatever it might be, don't be afraid to continue the relationship at that point, because they've already done one thing. So there's a good chance they may do a second. They're primed. So email marketing is a good example of, well, what might that next phase look like? And email marketing is fantastic, both in the nurturing phase, the conversion phase, and the post-conversion phase, where you're trying to turn people into advocates for your offer. You can grow your list through every touch point. So every time someone comes and lingers on the content, it's a great chance to ask them for their details. If they linger on specific content, don't be afraid to continue to pull them through. Always ask for that information. If they're not on your email list, try and get them on your email list, because that's about continuity and building on those relationships. But don't treat everybody as the same. You want to segment and personalize that list. So if you've got 2 sets of offering, as I said, construction and events, don't send them the same emails. Give the construction guys a construction one. Give the events guys an events one. And you can segment them in different ways. That's just one simple approach. Do use tools to manage this. Ideally, don't run it out of your own personal email. There's a huge range of problems with that, but the most significant one is in terms of data protection, and also the willingness or the opportunity, let's say the traceability of removing people from your list. So if someone requests to be removed from the newsletter list, you want to be able to do it, but more importantly, you want to be able to prove that you did it. And the benefit of the likes of MailChimp is if people can automatically do it, and so the responsibility isn't on you. So that's really, really important and useful. So automate unsubscriptions I've got there. Design those emails for conversion in the same way that you design your landing pages. Now it's a slightly different bit of science, but a lot of the lessons that are in there overlap. Keep the message on. If it's a pure conversion focused email, keep the focus on that conversion. Don't give them 3 offers when what you really want is for them to just click on 1 offer. So make it very focused. Also remember that mobile users, about 50% of web traffic is mobile, and equally on emails. We're all looking at our emails now. Your emails should show easily on a mobile phone, so don't neglect that part of the design. Increasingly, that might be the starting point, not the end point. And don't trick people to read your emails. So don't have a subject line that's tricksy and so on. That will get people to look at it, but they won't look at it a second time or a third time. You will get your unsubscribed. So be upfront about what you're about, and if they don't read it, and if they're not reading on it over a period of time, don't be afraid to clear out your email list as well. If people aren't opening your emails, they're not valid for that. They're not there. So get them out of the mix. You're only bothering them, and it's additional effort for you. So get them out of the mix. They're skewing your segmentation. Personalization is super important, and particularly in email, but also across your site. It has there's lots of evidence to support a huge impact on open rate, a huge impact on conversion. On the web, it's 2 to 5 times as effective. Buyers are 48% more likely to consider solutions with personalized marketing. Personalization isn't Mr. Fullard or even Coman, although that's an element of it. It's about having an offer that's about me. So it's about segmentation. So it's about a construction email to the construction guys, an event email to the event guys. That's personalization as much as putting my name on the front. Of course, dear customer gets in the way as well, so ideally have their name, don't have a mix. But it's more about those behaviorally targeted messaging. Upsell and cross-sell, so we talked about those customers that are in, sell them more. If they're already there, sell them more, that's obvious, but it's hyper-targeted, and you can leverage all of those inbound channels. And as I said, I think this is probably one of the key areas for you. Build your customer enthusiasm and encourage them to share that enthusiasm. So I don't know if you've got schemes for recommenders. So if you recommend somebody and they become a member or a customer, there's some benefit, whatever that might be, even if it's just recognition. But that's absolutely worth thinking about. Tell people that they can do it, show them how they can do it, measure it, and again, be ruthless if it's not working, cut it. But I bet you it will work. And there is no more potent recommendation than a recommendation from someone you know. If you tell me I should do it and I know you, I'm more than likely going to follow that through. I'll certainly investigate it. So it's incredibly powerful, and you should certainly leverage it given the nature of your organizations. Then automated marketing. So I'm talking about a lot of stuff here. There's a lot of different tools, but much of this can be automated to a certain extent. So you can use tools that can support you through this. So you can use tools that track how people run through your site. You can know if they went to this content, then they shouldn't go to this content. You can feed them specific content. So if they've come on the construction site, you can have in the page rather than they've gone to a construction content, the next time they come back to the front page, you could have prioritized or changed the site so that front page now reflects the construction stuff more than the event stuff. So you can do an awful lot of things here. There is some investment associated with that, so it's worth exploring what it is, but it's a force multiplier. It means that it gives you scope and scale beyond the size of your organization, and that's a good fit for this topic here. It means that one marketer can do an awful lot of things once they've set it up, and it allows you to nurture that customer all the way through those myriad touch points. But there is a warning here, which is don't try to do it all in one go. Do pick your battles, sequence it, prioritize it, and work your way through it step by step. Because honestly, if you try and do all of that, there's so much you will drown. In this case, fall off the cliff. So thank you very much. That's more than enough, I think.
I'm trying not to upset the camera here, because we're testing out something new today, which is to begin to use a system called Periscope. Periscope actually fits in with Twitter. I think it's been bought by Twitter very recently, which means that we've been live broadcasting this particular presentation that Coman's given us. And in fact, Coman's the MD of the company, Coman, is with us as well today, so thank you for joining us. And from that, but we've been doing it to a closed group. So it's actually specifically people who we know from the association's perspective who have an interest in these particular areas. So this is just a beta testing, so don't worry. Nothing you say will go down on the internet for permanence. But we have had some questions, so I thought some of these, I'll just go this way just in case people can't hear me properly. Some of these are for yourself, Coman, but I suspect some of them are probably for group debate that maybe we can take away to deal with, to talk about a bit more after the break. But the first one is a really interesting point. Are mutuals at the risk of losing their unique selling point, their USP, such as closeness to members and affinity groups, by using digital marketing and communications? Now that becomes a really interesting question, and something that, as I say, I think that's probably worth us just considering as part of our wrap-up after coffee.
Well, let me give you a couple of considerations in relation to that, though.
Nice.
The market is changing, of course. So we have the emergence of a digital native, whose expectation is that, so it depends on who you're going to do business with, but the increasing expectation of the market is that we will have some element of business done this way. So look, if I'm doing anything, I'm going to do, the first search is going to be on Google before I go to the next stage anyway. So there's at a minimum, there's that. It's all in how you use it. So if you're going to use digital as a barrier, yeah, that's going to be a problem. Right. But if you're aligning to who your customer is and what your value proposition is, it's only going to add, or it should only add, and that should be your design and execution goals. But I guess it's only as good as how you choose to use it. So if you let it get in the way, it certainly will. But I think there is definitely an opportunity to grow your business this way.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that we can sometimes be a bit protectionist about. If we say we already know who our target audience is, so are we going to go into these directions where that could in fact be a barrier to growth in the future, as you say, as the digital native becomes more of the people that we're wanting to get to.
So let me give you a case study example. A client of ours is a Chamber of Commerce, a large Chamber of Commerce in Ireland, and they released a tender which in essence said, make us LinkedIn, give us digital networking. So this is the thing that they asked for. And our tender response was, no, that's really kind of a bad idea. Why would you be a pale imitation of LinkedIn, where you're expecting people to pay for something they're already getting free on a bigger network, when you could be the best version of who you are? So and they bought that argument, and in the end, if you like, the digital solution that we focused on was, okay, the core value proposition is the networking experience. How can we use digital to support the networking experience? And the whole offering went about that. So I agree, it's all about, when you recognize your USP, it's leaning into the USP and using digital to support that, and not get distracted into other stuff.
Right, and the other question we've got, with two or three others, but the other sort of more pertinent one is that people are bombarded with information every day. How can you catch their attention with your own communications and marketing plan? How can you engage them? Big problem nowadays.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of noise. So the only way I know is relevance. So by understanding who they are and what do they want, those goals, pains, and gains. If you're crafting content or messaging or advertising that's about those, you're at least relevant. So that's the first part. The second is make sure you're getting that relevant content to them. So that's targeting and segmentation. So in many ways, it's the classic marketing challenge. It's just in a specific channel.
Right. Does anybody here have any questions at the moment they'd like to put to Coman, where we have his expertise in the room?
I'm sure you're sick of hearing me talk at this stage.
No, that was really fascinating. I think what we got there was the sort of the oversight as to what a good strategy looks like. But then, we have one at the back there.
Just in relation to cooking, we talked about that earlier. There's a lot of data protection coming down the tracks, and people's privacy is important. And people are forced down the route of accepting cookies in order to actually transact. But I suppose, do you think that there's likely to be changes in the rules of the game, if you like, going forward?
Yeah, there's a huge amount of things that are going to kick in the next 12 months. But whatever happens, the digital offering will change to match that. So it's about setting your sails with respect to the wind that's there. So there'll still be a way to manage that. Cookies is definitely what's there right now. I don't necessarily see that changing. You're quite right in that there's an awful lot of them out there, but increasingly most people by and large just accept them and move on, or reject them and don't. And what that will limit is your ability to track them through that journey as an anonymous user. What it really will mean is you're going to craft a journey that tries to make them unanonymous. So you invite them into a conversation and give them a reason to give you that, to create that relationship, whether that's to accept the cookie or to give you your email address or whatever it is. So it would become increasingly incumbent on the provider to make that conversion the starting point, whereby you create that relationship. And that's, I would say, no bad thing for a mutual organization, because I think that's you're already beginning to create a relationship which starts as a member. It's probably a bigger concern for the more quick touch customer, or those that are keeping their customers more at a distance. So it might wind up being a competitive advantage for your organizations.
Yeah, and I'll just use that as an opportunity to do a brief ad. Actually, is a brief ad for something for free, always nice. We in the Brussels office in October, we're actually going to be holding a one-day workshop on GDPR and the implications for the European membership. And we're hoping to have a representative from the European Commission join us from that as well. So we haven't got a date tied down, and that's partly because we want to make sure we get the right people there. So it's going to be in October, probably mid-October, so keep your eyes open. Everybody's welcome. To say it's free of charge. So, and we'll make sure that we have physical cookies as well as the virtual cookies available for everybody. Any final question for Coman? Do we have one here?
I was interested in the personalisation of your landing page, because I just think that's phenomenal that you come from, say, as you said, construction or the events, but when you come into the landing page, it's tailored to your specific need. Is that a difficult process, an expensive process? How do you identify where they're coming from so that you can give them the personalised?
Yeah, so I mean, there's probably two ways you could do it. One is very cheap, relatively cheap, and the other is more expensive. So a simple way would be you're running campaigns that are specific. So I'm going to do ads that are just for construction, and so it is a construction conversion, and it's very, very focused that way. And from a landing page, an advertisement to landing page perspective, that's probably the best approach. In terms of site variation, so they've landed on some content that tells me they're one person or another, and then the rest of their experience changes to reflect that. That's more expensive because it requires background infrastructure. There are a lot of products out there, however, that support that. They're not huge investments, but it probably means you have to shift your website onto that, so there's a cost inherent in it. But it's an investment, so it goes back to your ROI. If I can do that, what's my likely uplift? And if I multiply that out, does that justify that spend? And if it does, it's worth pursuing, because typically it comes bundled with a load of other automated marketing tools that do it. So a system we use in Continuum is a company called Kentico, and they have, it's basically a content management system that allows you to publish content, but it's got a whole suite of this stuff. And they do a demo of a coffee shop. So the example is, you come in, it's not a real shop, they just do this as a demo. You come in and you can look at big coffee machines, or I can look at individual coffee mugs. And if I click on the big coffee machines and I come back to the front page, everything treats you now as a coffee shop proprietor. And it makes an assumption. So it doesn't offer you little bags of coffee anymore, it offers you big bags of coffee. So you can still buy that other stuff, but the thrust of the site is treating you as that persona. If you looked at the coffee mug, or I think it was a mini cafetiere, then they treat you as a consumer, and so we're not going to show you any of that big stuff now, it's all these smaller products. So that's a very simple divide, and it's all facilitated by that design, by that system, and then the design that reflects that and allows that to happen. But it's very relatively straightforward to do when you buy the underlying system.
Yeah, but then you get the other side of these sorts of things, which is a couple of years ago, I had to buy a pair of tickets for One Direction.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, you thought I love every boy band in the world now. Ticketmaster bombards me all the time. You know, Harry Styles is in town. That's how I knew Justin Bieber was here, because So, you know, there are pros and cons. It almost puts me off Ticketmaster.
It's the Amazon experience. So I bought one book for a present for somebody, and
Exactly.
now
Now they think I'm 15.
But that's where they need to be looking at are they cleaning out their mailing list? So if they've sent you 50 and you haven't clicked on one of them or even opened one, there's no way you should be on that list. They should be cleaning you up because they're only upsetting you. You might be a different demographic. In fact, their next email should be about something wildly different to see. Well, maybe you'd respond to that. So they're not leveraging the insight that they've got by your lack of activity.
Yeah, I suppose so. Okay, Coman, thank you very much for that. I think we can continue any sort of conversations over coffee. Coffee will be back in where we had it yesterday. We're coming up it's just after 20 past, so I suggest